Hey Amanda, for some reason I am not able to get my video to work. Let me make that happen.
Okay.
With my new computer, everything is like very sensitive.
Isn't that fun?
So
I'm trying to see where I do my screen share.
Where is it?
Hi, Casey.
Hi.
Katie is working on getting camera up and going.
So it looks like my camera's not working either, but I can see myself. Can you see me?
I can see you. I can hear you. You are good to go.
For some reason, there's a slash in front of the computer, but the camera's on and the microphone's. I don't know what that computer is. I don't know.
This is so frustrating. I look nice today and everything. Let me rejoin. Let me leave and rejoin and see if that'll work.
Okay.
Sounds good.
This is so frustrating.
Can y'all hear
me? Hi, Mariana. Yeah, can hear you and see you.
Yay. I totally did not know what I was doing, and I didn't see that button that says share. I was like, where is
camera? Where is everybody? Why can't I see anything?
Same, and I am trying to figure out how to screen share. I don't see that option. Does anyone see it?
I don't see that option.
It's not the video button, right? Because that would just turn us on and off.
Dang it.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, so it's the button that I said had the slash through it. So it's a camera. I mean, it's a computer, and then at the bottom is screen share. You can do YouTube video, whiteboard. You got it. I see it.
Awesome. So is that working for everyone? It looks good. The screen is there and you can still see all of the panelists.
Well, I'm wondering why it's so small.
Let's see.
Like, would we need to turn off our video until
it's not small for me? So
it's not small for me either.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's just me because mine is like probably the size of 2 video screens of people. It's like really tiny.
No, mine is good.
Mine too. So that might be what they see, as long as they can see it.
Yeah.
Great. And I wonder, are people, I can't remember, are people just joining or do we let them in?
I think they will just join in and we'll see them on the side.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Great. Well, it is 11:45. Y'all let me know when we should get started.
Okay. I hope Katie's camera works.
I know. She was like, and I look good today.
Katie.
It's so annoying. It's saying that my webcam isn't detected, but it's built into my computer, as is my audio. So I'm really annoyed.
Did anyone take down that technical support?
No. All you have to do is, Katie, if you go out of here and go to sessions, there's a tech support
Okay, I'll try to do that. I feel like it's a personal computer issue, but
Yeah, it could be, but we want to see you. The other alternative is to use another device, like your iPad or your iPhone or something else that has a camera. And she's gone. So is Mariana.
Uh-oh.
Now we have other people.
Hi, welcome everyone. We are just trying to iron out a couple of technical kinks before we get this panel started. We're so grateful you're joining us, and just stand by for one more minute and we'll get started in just a couple moments. As a reminder to everyone joining us, we have this session will be recorded, so you'll be able to go back and visit it after the conference. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. And the chat feature isn't very obvious to me right now, but I'm sure that I'll figure it out soon. Folks that are on the panel will help moderate that chat. And then we're hoping to have a little bit of time at the end of a couple of questions I have prepared for the panelists to hear from you all and to incorporate any questions y'all may have.
Yeah, I'm looking up at the top right now, Amanda, and it looks like it's just us still. So we did have one person join us, but they may not be there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to give people a little bit of time because it may not have been very clear how to get into the sessions.
Yeah, I mean, if we're having trouble, I'm assuming other people are also to figure out the landscape of a virtual conference. This is the first completely virtual conference I have ever attended, so figuring out the sessions and staging is new to me.
We also left the stage area. We're not sure when they're finishing the main panel either. So.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yay, there's Katie.
yeah, with my phone. We are the small 5.
Katie, if you go into horizontal mode, we might be able to get a little bit more of you. There we go.
That's perfect.
Okay, the only thing is I can't see the slides at all.
Do you want to get on your computer and on your phone? Can you do both?
I can try, but it doubles the audio.
Well,
Yeah, just turn one of them off.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do that. Otherwise, there'll be an echo.
Yeah, which is the last thing that we want.
But you look lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't see what I look like either. So who knows what I'm doing. Okay. That works. Is that
Awesome.
everybody?
Great. Well, I think that now that we have figured out our technical hiccups, I think we can go ahead and get started. I know folks will be finding their way to this session as we go, but like I said a moment ago, it's being recorded. So if you miss anything, you can always go back and rewatch. So I just want to welcome everyone to our breakout session, Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste, using data to inform the City of Austin food system response during the COVID-19 pandemic. In this breakout session, I'll share some brief context about the partnership. We'll have some short presentations from our panelists about the data collection and analysis, and then we'll jump into the panel question and answer. And I'm going to see, Casey, do you mind muting just for a moment until we get over to you? just to minimize background noise. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a chat. Feel free to use this throughout the session, and we'll do our best to address your comments. And we'll hopefully have some time at the end where we can invite you onto the screen to ask a question, or we'll pull out some of the questions from the chat. So I'm joined here today with our 4 panelists to walk you through how the City of Austin partnered with the UT School of Public Health and Dell Medical School to help make sense of the increase in food needs due to COVID-19. We'll share some background information on how the partnership got started, the methods used for data collection, what we learned, and how we're using this data to inform strategy. So we'll hear from Dr. Catherine Janda and Dr. Sandra Vandenberg from the University of Texas School of Public Health, and Casey Hansen and Mariana Espinosa from the Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity at Dell Medical School. I'm your moderator, Amanda Rolick. I work as a food system advisor with the Office of Sustainability at the City of Austin. So let me just jump into a little bit of some context. So taking us back, starting in February of 2020, this was when the Austin Travis County Emergency Operations Center initially stood up to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic in an attempt to control the infection rate and respond to the crisis. As part of that response, the Food Access Task Force was created and is headed up by our office, the Office of Sustainability, in deep collaboration with other city departments like Austin Public Health and county departments, and an amazing network of external stakeholders, including researchers and direct service providers that are responsible for much of the frontline food access work. This network includes representatives from our local independent school districts, the Central Texas Food Bank, food rescue organizations, homeless service providers, faith-based groups, volunteers, and many more. We meet weekly. Back in the early months, we were meeting twice a week, but we have brought that down to meeting once weekly to discuss any pressing issues and then identifying unmet needs that we may need to share up through the emergency operations channel to ensure that the most vulnerable community members have access to adequate and nutritious food. So, in the early days of the response, the landscape was shifting really quickly. So there was a decrease in efficiency in getting people food due to traditional models that we all know, like congregate feeding at soup kitchens and pantries, being really no longer safe or viable options. There was also an increase in need as the stay-at-home orders came into effect and more people were having to stay home from work, losing wages, or having to cover meals for their families that were previously covered through free or reduced priced meals at their schools. And on top of all of that, we saw many organizations lose some of their volunteer base, which tends to be older, retired individuals, those who we know can particularly be vulnerable to COVID, because they were choosing to also stay home and reduce their risk of exposure. In some cases, we were even seeing some emergency feeding locations temporarily closing altogether. So we quickly realized that we needed more information about how our local food needs landscape was operating. And, oops, sorry about that. And we needed to, figure out how to best allocate very limited resources and limited time to inform our food access planning as part of the ongoing pandemic response. But truthfully, our office of two, myself and the food policy manager, Edwin Marty, who were kind of heading up this food access task force, we were maxed out on our capacity. We were, working about 15-hour days at a minimum and just really didn't have time to dive into the research and data collection needed to inform our response. We knew we needed to act quickly and we needed to tap into our network and leverage the power of our partners. So that's where our wonderful panelists come in. So the city staff coordinates and partners regularly with UT School of Public Health and Dell Medical School Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity through a variety of initiatives, through the Austin Travis County Food Policy Board, through our Fresh for Less mobile market program, and the corresponding evaluations of those programs, through SNAP Gap research, and so many other touch points. We also knew that the Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity had been working on the household level assessment and had been working with Austin Public Health on some contact tracing efforts. And so we thought, how might we leverage some of the existing community touch points and engagement that was happening, some of the data collection that may be happening through other partners like the United Way 211 call line, and see if we could dig in to better understand what was happening from a food access perspective. So now I'm going to pass it off to our partners to explain some of the details of how they stepped into this work, starting with Dr. Catherine Chanda, explaining her work analyzing the 211 data.
Thanks, Amanda. So as Amanda stated, my name is Katie Chanda, and I will be presenting today a little bit on the work that we've done to pivot to identifying areas with unmet food need, utilizing 211 call data during the pandemic. Next slide. So a little bit of background. For those of you who aren't familiar with 211, it is operated by the United Way for Greater Austin, and it's a call hotline where individuals can call 211 to ask for information about resources and a variety of other components. So for instance, you could call 211 and ask about where the nearest food bank is to you, and given your zip code, they'd be able to provide you with the one that's closest to you, their operating hours, etc. And you can call about more than one need. And they also will help connect and bridge that gap between United Way and Health and Human Services, and will help provide that kind of connection regarding benefits. I got my PhD in the spring of 2020 and utilized 2018 211 call log data from the United Way for Greater Austin and their 10-county service area to identify areas with food needs and limited food access. And because of that experience and the opportune, I guess you could say, timing of defending that dissertation right at the beginning of the pandemic in early April, it was really discovered that this type of analysis would be really relevant and helpful during this unprecedented time. Next slide. So the purpose of what this analysis was to identify areas with unmet food needs due to COVID-19 in Travis County. Some of the issues with food insecurity data in general is that it takes a long time in order to have that data become available, especially at a zip code level. And being able to utilize kind of this crowd available source, being able to use these call logs from Travis County and be able to drill down into a zip code level was a really unique opportunity. And given the expertise, we were able to have a fairly quick turnaround, especially compared to the year-long, 2 years long, 3 years long wait that often comes with looking at food insecurity data. So what we did was we analyzed these calls monthly from January to August and then October to November 2020 and compared it to 2019. The reason why September wasn't included is because there was some maintenance to the call line, so it kind of muddied some of the data and it wasn't necessarily appropriate to share that. So you'll notice in everything that we share today and talk about, September is not included because it would give kind of a misrepresentation of what's going on. We also were able to categorize each call for a call reason and be able to do that for multiple call reasons within the same call. And we looked at this by zip code. And then due to the wonderful collaboration with the City of Austin, Office of Sustainability, as well as United Way and their connectatx.org site, we were able to have a regularly updated list of all of the different emergency food assets that were open during this time each month. And we utilize this information as well as some limited demographic data, which include gender, language spoken, whether it was the first time that they were calling the line or not, etc. Unfortunately, race ethnicity was not listed on the demographic or in the call log due to concerns with HHSC and issues with potential discrimination that go back way, way, way long ago. So we were not able to utilize that in our analysis. However, in some of the things that I present, we pair some American Community Survey data from 2018, which is the most recently released American Community Survey data, to kind of see some of the racial, ethnic demographics, as well as income and other factors that are not included within the call log. So by doing this, we were hoping to identify areas with unmet food need. And we first looked at this by looking at overall food calls within the county by month. So the lighter blue is 2019 data and the darker blue is 2020 data. You can see that in early 2020, pre-pandemic, January, February, pre-pandemic outbreak within the greater Travis County area, that call volume is overall pretty similar, especially for food-related calls. And to also give a little bit of extra context, food-related calls were considered to be in that category if they were calling about a food bank, food pantry, soup kitchen, free and reduced lunch, SNAP benefits, basically anything that demonstrated a need for having additional food assets or food benefits. Then you notice that these call data increase in March and then really increase in April. The highest overall food need call data existed in April, May, followed by, again, another peak in October and November, as you can see. April and as well as October and November, the main drivers for these calls were actually calls regarding SNAP and SNAP benefits that were transferred to that HHSC line. And just as a point, that finding in April is especially relevant because that's 3 times the food need call volume data that the county received in 2019. So that's a pretty astronomical spike. Next slide. So then when we drill down into what this looks like by zip code and overall kind of the different geographic trends within the county, we found that the call volume is highest in the eastern crescent of Travis County for overall call volume, food need call volume, as well as the proportion of food need calls within the zip code, which I'll present in a second. This is somewhat expected, given that in 2018 American Community Survey data, these are areas, as I'll show you in a map in a second, that have greater proportions of communities living under the poverty line. They're more racially, ethnically diverse, and it's just been a historically underserved area within the county. And we also, for each of these monthly reports, presented maps depicting the proportion of food calls to 211 by zip code and the location of assets for each month, for each report. Next slide. So this is that map I was referring to about American Community Survey data. You can see all of these kind of overlapping experiences being more experienced in the eastern part of Travis County. So you can see a poverty rate over 15%, predominantly people of color zip codes, as well as income under 70,000, just as kind of a reference point from 2018. So when we look at the next slide, which includes a map just of the November report, you can find all of our other reports, and I think Amanda will mention this later, at the Office of Sustainability website, as well as other sources. But you can see that these darker colors, meaning the higher proportion of food need calls within the zip code of being 30% or over, are almost exclusively within that eastern crescent of Travis County. And then some of the blips in western Travis County, it's more because the total sample that's within that zip code is rather low. So that proportion being high isn't that alarming when it's, for instance, 5 out of 7 calls to 211 being about food needs. Those black dots are were the open emergency food assets during the month of November. And I think that this demonstrates, and what we found consistently throughout our each of our monthly reports, going from March to August and then October and November, is that these findings of higher food need call volume in eastern Travis County imply that there could be widening disparities that pre-existed the pandemic, but are continuing to grow in terms of food need related issues and food insecurity during the pandemic. So next slide. So a little bit about the deliverables or research and how that has translated to policy and practice. All of the reports that we have developed have been shared with the City of Austin, United Way for Greater Austin, Dell Medical School, and other collaborators. We have regularly then gotten feedback from the community for additional or more specific information that we've been able to provide. We also provided in a bulk of our reports recommendations for placement of emergency food assets within 2 zip codes specifically, and to closely monitor additional zip codes that have emergency food assets located within them, but they still may have unmet food needs due to just the proportion of food calls and the number of assets within the geographic area. This was also important because one of those 2 consistently recommended zip codes actually received an emergency food asset in September 2020 due to our findings from our report. And this has also been, I think, very helpful to be able to collaborate with Dell Med and the City of Austin to bounce ideas off of, figure out where to leverage our experiences and expertise to direct future research, and has also led to the development of a manuscript that's currently under revisions. So hopefully we'll be able to disseminate this type of collaborative practices across the discipline of public health and other disciplines looking at food access and community development. So yes, so thank you to the United Way for Greater Austin, Dr. Sandra Vandenberg, who I will be introducing in a second, as well as Raven Hood, who's been helpful within this analysis, as well as the other groups represented on this panel. So to briefly introduce Sandra Vandenberg, she's a professor of health promotion and behavioral sciences at the UT Health School of Public Health, and is also the associate director of the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living. So Sandra, feel free to take over.
All right, thanks, Katie. So what I'll be talking about during the next 5 to 7 minutes or so are some ways where we were able to go into more depth in terms of how people during COVID-19 were accessing food. We had this great opportunity in that we were already conducting a study called the FRESH study, which is the next slide, Amanda. Thank you. So the FRESH study it's an evaluation study, it's still ongoing, in which we are evaluating some of the City of Austin's Healthy Food Access Initiative, also called Fresh for Less, which was started a few years ago. This initiative included 3 different nonprofit organizations, or includes Sustainable Food Center, Farm Share, and GAVA at the beginning. Those organizations were responsible for implementing different strategies to increase access. And then the University of Texas School of Public Health was responsible for doing the evaluation. So that particular evaluation was really focused on what is the impact of the FRESH strategies on residents' food and vegetable purchasing and consumption. And for that study, we recruited and are following a cohort of 400 participants, mainly residents of low-income communities in the Eastern Crescent of Austin. We are collecting all kinds of data, but including some pretty in-depth survey data. Then in addition, we have some more observational data points where we are looking at the food access points. We also have a subsample of people who are wearing accelerometers and GPS units, so we can really examine their travel behaviors in terms of how they're accessing food. So that study started 2 years ago, and so we collected data for 2 years, and then COVID happened. So can we go to the next slide? But before we talk about that, let me just give you just real quickly, some demographic data on the participants of our study, just to give you some idea of, who are we sampling, who are we getting data from. So you can see in the map, and it's not very straightforward, but we have to make it kind of small. But those are the areas in Austin from which we recruited participants for our study. So these are all in the Eastern Crescent of Austin and Travis County. And if we look at just at ethnicity, we see that over 50% of our sample is Hispanic, which is not surprising. We have about 10% African Americans, and then about 31% white or other. And in terms of income, again, we're focusing on lower income communities. So as you can see here, we had quite a few people who are making less than $45,000 per year, which living in Austin, I would say could be considered poverty level. So we had a group of 400 folks that we've been following over a couple of years and who were completing our surveys and stuff. So we were like, well, now that COVID's happened, now, first of all, what happened is that our intervention changed. So next slide, please. Okay, wait, go back one. There we go. So at the point, so March, February of 2020, the only intervention that was still ongoing were the mobile markets, and that the farm share is organizing. And at that point, when Major Adler placed a stay-at-home order, of course, the mobile markets were no longer able to go out into the community. So they ended up pivoting to a different strategy in which customers can order food online, and farm share will then deliver the food to the home. So it's a home deliveries strategy, sorry. So given that the strategy changed, we had to change our evaluation plan as well. We were able to get some more money from our original funding agency, and we're able to complete 2 more rounds of data collection to really focus on how people are now accessing food during COVID-19. And we really wanted to look both at the beginning of the pandemic and then, but also then, for example, 6 months later, because I believe that as the pandemic continues, we will see more and more food insecurity in our communities. Next slide, please. So in order to do this, we no longer were able to do our surveys in person, as we did at the very beginning of the study. So we created a new online Qualtrics survey with, again, questions that were similar to the questions we were asking already, but now also additional questions that were very specifically related to COVID-19. We followed up with our original cohort, and then in addition, we asked others living again in the same areas to also consider taking our survey. This was a little bit more difficult, again, given people tend to respond a little bit better if you ask in person to reply to a survey. Now we had to do it via email or text, and it's a little bit more difficult to recruit participants. But we were able to recruit almost 400, whom we have collected data from about April, May, June of 2020, and we are now, we just finished our second data collection, so February or January 2021. In addition, we have created a qualitative interview guide and are interviewing 75 of those participants and getting even more in-depth information. And that's ongoing. We just started this a couple weeks ago, and we will continue until we finish up our 75 participants. Next slide, please. So, I hope y'all can see the slide better than I can. So just to give you just a couple of slides of results for our COVID-19 results, and these are from the first data collection. Again, we have mostly Hispanic participants. So this breakdown of demographics is very similar to our original cohort. So again, mostly Hispanics, some African Americans, and then some whites. Next slide, please. So in terms of food insecurity, this is one of our main points of interest because we were seeing, right away when the pandemic hit, that food insecurity and food access was an issue. So we're like, well, very curious, what is going to be the increase in food insecurity after COVID-19 started. So if you can see here, the blue bars are food secure people, and the orange bar are food insecure. So the first, the top graph you'll see food insecurity before COVID-19. So there you see about, it's about 35% of our sample was already food insecure. Then the second set of bars are food insecurity after COVID-19. And then the third set of bars are the newly food insecure folks. And this is really interesting. It's about 18% or so that are newly food insecure. And this is an interesting group of people because, again, they were food insecure before COVID hit, but then because of all kinds of issues, mainly, most likely, and we're looking more into this right now because of lost wages or just losing jobs altogether, those folks are now becoming food insecure. So one of the questions we asked, since COVID-19, it has been more difficult to get enough food for my family to eat. And again, the blue bars are food secure, the orange bars are food insecure, and not surprisingly, you can see that the food insecure folks are having much more trouble finding enough food for their family to eat. Next slide, please. One of the other, so we have a lot more data that is like the data I just presented, just for time's sake. That's all I can present today. I did want to present these results because, again, they're very related to food access. And this is just a question where we had people could answer and respond or check out several different options. So we asked overall, are you concerned about any of the following in regards to you and your family? And then check all that apply. And again, if you see availability of food and cost of food are two of the issues that people are very concerned about. And again, of course, more so endorsed by the food insecure folks. Just another interesting, if you look at the COVID infection, so that's the set of bars almost all the way to the right, you can see that many, many people, of course, are concerned about this as well, which then has implications on how they find food or how they access food in terms of purchasing, going to food banks and stuff like that. So again, we have a lot more information, which we will be presenting some more tomorrow. And we're hoping to have a report out very soon that both the city can use, but also we'll go back to our funders. So this is it in a very much a nutshell. Appreciate y'all's time. And I am going to turn it over to Casey Hansen and Mariana Espinoza, who are both at the Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity at the UT Dell Medical School. And they will be presenting another way on how our community kind of is collaborating on trying to figure out, how to best help people who need more access to food.
Thank you, Sandra. We've had quite a few folks join us since we got started, so I just want to kind of reorient ourselves. So what we're doing right now, for those of you who didn't come in the very beginning, is kind of sharing a little bit about our partnership. And there are 3 partners that are actually on in this panel today. And so I actually work at UT Del Med, and so I'll be sharing a little bit about how we inserted ourselves into this partnership and what we brought to the table. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So I just want to give you just a little bit of orientation. Again, each partner kind of brought something different to the table. And one of the things that we were engaged in 2 years prior was an opportunity that we had that was called a household level assessment. And essentially what we were trying to do is we recognize at Del Med in our division that 80% of the things that impact health happen outside of the clinic, right? So not everyone has an illness. Not everyone is, managing something that actually has a health outcome, but we do know that there are things that are outside of those, outside of that clinic that does impact our health. What our blood pressure is, how regularly we're able to even go to see a doctor, whether or not we have a doctor. That means insurance, it means employment, those types of things. And we call those social drivers. And so we did a household level assessment in a very specific part of town, 2 areas actually that are part of Eastern Crescent. And we did an in-person data collection, and we literally went into people's homes and asked them about what was going on with their families, what needs they had. And then our main goal was to connect them to resources. So half the battle is, knowing where to go if you have a need. And I think that, Katie's part, just talking about the service that United Way provides and having 211, people can call a number. Not everybody even knows that that number exists, right? And so we just wanted to put community health workers into people's homes, really, to help them to navigate and just be a bridge to those resources. Because that's not all in our capacity. We're not a service provider. So we were being that linkage, if you will. And then what we did over time is just do follow-ups. So that was something that we felt like we could offer the city with regards to, trying to get some information out. And it actually would then allow for us to then connect to some of the information that not only Katie was gathering from 211 data, but also we could include some of the questions that Sandra had in their, their Fresh for Less program, in addition to some of their other opportunities in the Eastern Crescent, that we could start asking some of these questions in different ways. And so we did incorporate some of those questions, and we targeted some areas that Katie identified in her 211 data. So next slide, please. So one of the things that this led to, when we recognized that we felt like this was an opportunity for us to really kind of gather some specific information from folks, is because we're at the medical school, Austin Public Health had also asked some folks from our department to help with contact tracing. And so again, most of you are familiar with that, but for those who aren't, this is an opportunity for us to reach out to people who we know tested positive to COVID-19, and then identify if there's other people that need to possibly get tested and or self-isolate. And so we had a group of folks from our department who were working on that. And what we recognized is that the folks, once they were told they had to shelter in place, they needed things. How are they going to pay their car insurance? How are they going to pay their rent? And so the contact tracers really didn't have time to address those issues. But we had some experience in that. As we mentioned with the household level assessment, we've done follow-ups, we've done, resource connections. And so we felt like if we could set ourselves up to have people, if they chose, they could contact us directly. We could get back with them, just go through a couple of questions and then point them to resources. And so they opted in. This kind of was the pilot, if you will, for our check-in survey that Mariana will kind of give some more details about. And we were able to apply our household level assessment, processes in order to, again, do an assessment of some kind, identify resources, follow up via phone, and then make those referrals to local resources. And because we know about all of the different things that were going on in the city, they were constantly changing. Certain things were available at certain times, certain things weren't. And as those resources became available, we were doing our very best to get that information out to people. And I think, Sandra even mentioned, when FarmShare made a pivot from, having a pickup location to doing home delivery, we were able to share that resource with people. There was another one called Good Apple. They were actually doing deliveries to people's homes. And so if people tested positive, we wanted them to stay at home, but still get the resources that they needed. So those are just 2 of the food access examples that we have. I think that's it on my end. I will pass it over to my colleague, Mariana Espinosa, who is our Learning and Evaluation Manager in the Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity. Mariana?
Hey, everyone. So I'm just going to quickly run through kind of what our repivot was after we did this pilot with the contact tracers. And so from there, we launched what we call our Central Texas Check-In. And it was an online survey that we did in English and Spanish. And we wanted to, meet the city's needs and focus on certain priority populations. Some of those that we've mentioned, like people living in the Eastern Crescent, people of color, senior citizens, people with health conditions in rural parts of the community. And so we opened our survey up to Travis County residents and also to residents outside of Travis County that are in our 5-county region. So Dell Medical School also covers Caldwell County, Hayes, Williamson, and Bastrop, in addition to Travis. So we opened our survey up in 2 collection periods. The first was from August to September. It wasn't for the full month of August, but kind of like later in the month, and then on to about mid-September. And then again in October and December, kind of ending it around mid-December before the holidays. And the reason why we did that is to do what Casey was talking about, to follow up with people and make sure that they had the resources that they needed in a timely manner. And so that gave us the opportunity to, 1, go back and review our data, and then 2, to follow up with those folks who identified that they wanted us to reach back out to them. So I also wanted to share that our survey was targeted. It wasn't a random sample, and it wasn't a representative sample. It was a very targeted, convenient sample, if you're looking for the technical term. And so what we did was we worked through partners, us being the Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity. We have relationships with organizations in the community that community members trust. And so instead of us just sending out a survey from Dell Medical School, we worked through our partners to get the survey out to folks, from social media posts to emails to text messages. So lots of different ways. We just let them be the voice of getting the information out. And then our survey covered 4 main areas. And the reason why is because we wanted to cover the areas, 1, that were important for the city of Austin to learn about and be able to take action on, and then also areas that we could provide resources on. So while there's lots of issues going on because of COVID, we didn't want to capture everything that we could, because we wouldn't have been able to service all of those needs ourselves. And there are other great resources in the community like 211 that can provide that extra help. So I just wanted to share 2, just a little bit of information, like a little sampling of the information that we collected. So one of the questions we asked were about what do people need right now? And this was at the household level. So it would be a person responding for themselves and anyone else in their household. And so what's interesting is that most people responded that they needed food. And second to that, cash. There was a big chunk of people who said they didn't need anything, which is great. And then we have PPE, so protective equipment, and getting help paying utilities and rent. It's kind of like the highest needs that we saw in our survey population. Next slide. And so one of the things that's important to note about that data is that 48% of our sample indicated that they had at least 2 needs. So a lot of our sample had more than 1 need. It wasn't just food, or it wasn't just cash. A lot of times it was a combination of these things. A lot of times it was, if the person needed cash, it was to help pay rent and utilities. And so one thing to think about is we can't really isolate people's needs, that, you know, we are trying to be comprehensive in understanding and meeting people's needs, and knowing that what's happening right now, and I'm sure most of y'all are aware, but, you know, as people are diagnosed, or someone in their household, or even someone at their work or their kid's school is diagnosed, people are having to go into quarantine, and then they can't work, or they can't get to the resources that they need. Less cash flow is coming in, they miss their payments, and some of people even get evicted. And that was one of the questions we asked about too, was missed payments and evictions. And we won't get into that data right now, but once we have all of that data analyzed, it'll be up on the city website. So that's just a quick sample. And I know we have lots of questions to get to. So I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda so we can answer the panel questions, and then get back to the rest of y'all.
Great. Thank you to all of the panelists for giving us some of that, just a glimpse into the actual work that y'all were doing to make this partnership happen. I am still unable to see the chat. So if any of my panelists see that chat, help me figure out how to get to it. But we put together some questions that I'd just love to start with. And, I'm curious as to if you can speak a little bit to why you decided to engage in this work. And, I know for me, it's very, necessary to pull in research partners, because that's not some of the, strengths that we at the city have in terms of just research chops. And then also, the time to actually engage in some of this detailed research and community engagement. So I would just love to hear from some of you, what inspired you to enter into this partnership. And maybe Dr. Evans, can we start with you, or Vandenberg, sorry, can we start with you?
I'm unmuted now, right? I think for us at the UT School of Public Health, it just was a unique opportunity. And given that we were already collecting data related to food and food retail and how people are accessing food and food insecurity, it just made sense to kind of make this pivot. And in past studies and past opportunities that we've had, we know that working with others in the community just makes so much more sense, because working together we can just have a greater outcome, and plus you learn from working with others. So and I can't remember exactly how this whole collaboration started, but I think Casey and Mariana may have approached us. I know there was one email. Anyway, it was kind of cool how it all came together. It was somewhat organic, but having worked with Casey and Mariana before, and of course having worked with you, Amanda, and Edwin, and everybody at the city for years, I mean, this was a very natural, almost easy collaboration. So I feel collaborating with different organizations always is beneficial. So whenever, personally, I get the chance, I like to do that, but and I feel working in public health and what we do, we all want something for the common good. And again, working together just makes that easier. And actually more fun, right? To get feedback from other people, to have even meetings, even though they're over Zoom. It's just nice. So I think it's been a great collaboration.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I get to work with y'all on lots of different things on a regular basis, and getting into responding to the pandemic, responding to emergency, it just really crystallized for me how important, building relationships are to our resiliency as a community. So definitely, such a honor to be able to deepen these relationships with y'all and get to, work so closely to get the job done. Mariana, what was, from your perspective over at the Division of Community Engagement and Health Equity, what was the inspiration for Dell Medical School Population Health to get involved in this work?
Yeah, I totally echo what Sandra was saying about us having that existing relationship, and we like to work together, and we love what we do, right? But I think what's unique about kind of Del Med's position and where we sit in Del Med as the community engagement arm is that we had all these pre-existing relationships, and we also had Del Med kind of working alongside the city anyway to do contact tracing and to do seropositive testing and all these other things. And we as community engagement and health equity should do what we're good at. And so we were already good at doing this OLA approach of really connecting with people and using this survey method that's more personal and high touch. Although we were in, kind of this very low touch setting of the COVID pandemic being in our faces. But we knew, based on what we were hearing from partners in the community, that people were having trouble getting resources from 211, either because of, previous uncomfortableness with using the system, or maybe they called and they got put on hold, or maybe they called and they didn't get what they needed. You know, and 211 is a great service, but it wasn't working for everybody, and not everybody was comfortable using it. So we recognize that. We recognize that there are some people in the community that have, you know, they're worried about their immigration status and they don't know what benefits they actually can access without being a public charge. So that was a concern that we knew was out there. And also there were a lot of people that they had never used public services before. And this was kind of their first time getting hit so hard that they lost their job, or maybe they were unemployed for a month or something like that, or, you know, just trying to deal with all these new things and not knowing where to go. And so there's this new batch of people that we knew, you know, our model that we'd established could kind of meet that need, not completely, but kind of provide that fill-in gap where, you know, the city and the county and 211 and all these other great services in the community were, you know, working hard. And so we were just trying to, like, you know, one up and work alongside them to get some of those needs met.
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, it wouldn't be, you know, so much amazing work came out of this partnership, but, you know, I think it behooves us to at least touch on some of what wasn't easy, what was hard, what were some of the things we came up against when trying to make this partnership work, when trying to make this research get off the ground, this analysis. And so I'd love to, you know, hear from each of you or whoever would like to share, you know, what some of those obstacles were that you faced pivoting projects and fitting your work into these new circumstances. And Casey, I wonder if we can start with you.
And I actually think I might answer one of the questions that's in the chat. The hardest part for us is exactly what Mariana actually just said, which is we're accustomed to doing face-to-face, you know, even going into people's homes to collect data. It's hard to ask hard questions when people don't feel that you're there and you're well-intentioned. And that's harder to do when you're sending a survey, you know, via email or text. And yet the community rose to the occasion. And we had even some, you know, we had some questions that even asked people, you know, if there's anything you want to share with the city, state, or county, or what have you. And they said, you know, thank you for doing this. You know, we're grateful that we're a part of a city that even asks its residents how they're doing, you know. So that's one piece. And the other hard thing is, as Mariana mentioned earlier, we were actually, you know, really wanting to get to, which is normally part of our work, people who you normally don't hear from. So I think one person asked about senior adults. You know, we knew that there were going to be people who could not get out, who were told not to get out, but we needed to get resources to them. And so I'm really leaning on our partners to connect with those populations, our folks who, you know, are unsheltered, right? We were very intentional about trying to get to those folks. And we're not sure if we got to everyone that we wanted to, but those are the things that made it hard, because we had to do it from, you know, these screens, you know, from behind our closed home doors. And it's not the way that we prefer to do things, but we did the best that we could. So that's what I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And Dr. Vandenberg, what from your perspective was one of the challenges during this stage of your work?
I think really following up what Mariana was saying in terms of collecting data from folks using technology, right? We assume that everybody has access to internet or reliable internet, smartphones, and yes, a lot of people do, but there are still a lot of people also who don't, or who are not even comfortable using it, right? So, for example, when you send out a survey via email or text, you know, I do wonder who we didn't reach, like who did not answer, and may those people be even in greater need. So our results that we're getting right now could be even, you know, be very different if we really could reach everybody. Because we have in the past where we also did data collection going door to door. people who couldn't read, right? Even though we do this in Spanish and English, I mean, there's still people who actually can't write, or they can't read, or they can't speak the language, Spanish or English. And then there also, what we're missing is that connection when we used to go to the door. And sometimes people just needed to talk, right? And we would spend 45 minutes at a house because the person just wanted to talk. And those are things we miss, right? It's just different. We don't have the in-person connection. So that's more the social kind of barriers, but then really logistically, of course, trying to find funding for doing additional data collection. And the city of Austin was very generous. And our original funding agency was very generous by coming up with more money, but that is always an issue. And then the actual logistical things of getting money through our system in terms of working for a university, that is always an issue. It could take months, and we didn't have months. So everybody, I think, was kind of poised to make this work and do this quickly. Like our IRB, which normally can take easily 2 months, done in a couple days. And that was just very different and made our lives actually a lot easier. So kind of the opposite of what you're asking about, those are not barriers, they became facilitators in doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I can very much relate. I mean, I've worked for the city of Austin for about 6 years now, 7 years, and I'm proud to say that I hadn't seen this city move as fast as it had, and until this pandemic hit. And I think it's teaching us a lot about how we can move more quickly, and how maybe we should find ways to be a little bit more agile and nimble. And when we can. I know that some of that slowness is by design, but I think there's a lot to be learned from what we have been able to do in the last year. I know we just have a few more minutes, and I really want to get to this question of how we are seeing this data shared and used. Dr. Janda, in your presentation, you briefly mentioned that the analysis of the 211 data resulted in a food asset being placed in a zip code that had previously not been being serviced, but was getting a lot of calls from that area. So, maybe a little bit about how that came to be, or just who this was shared with and for what purpose.
Absolutely. So this information was shared with the Office of Sustainability and then disseminated out really quickly through the emergency food access coordination calls. And I think that organic network that Amanda and Edwin Marty, for those familiar with City of Austin logistics, so quickly put together, I think it was incredible to have so many different groups from so many different areas of expertise, whether it be within the nonprofit sector, the academic sector, et cetera, to be able to quickly disseminate this information that led to this like rapid research to policy and program. I think that's super helpful and rapid. But really quickly, I want to touch on, I know that Terry Barksdale had a quick question about software and data analysis and everything. And while I did not have to collect my own data from 211, I was provided with call logs. It's always very time consuming to clean data that was not meant for a quantitative analysis. This is more something that kind of was an document, not necessarily a data set ready for prime time. So it took countless, I don't even want to estimate the number of human resource hours dedicated to cleaning all of these data at various points and re-cleaning and reanalyzing. But in terms of some software analysis tools, really quickly, we were given the data in Excel, we cleaned in Stata, we exported to Excel to import to GIS and make maps, which is Geographic Information Systems, which is a mapping software, and used R to graph and make visual displays. So basically, for those in the data nerd world, we used a lot. We used all the programs. And I'm happy to answer more specific questions about that offline.
Wonderful. Yeah, I know that our time is at the end, but I just wanted to thank all of you who shared experience. You know, I mean, such big lessons for me about how not just one person can respond. You know, it's resilience, access, and equity is about acknowledging that no one person, no one agency, no one working group can do this work alone. We really need to lean on the strengths and the existing work and relationships that are driving our lives both in and out of a crisis, and really lean on our diversity of strengths. So, which I think this partnership really has done. And I'm so grateful to everything y'all have shared. This is the contact information for all of the panelists that are joining us today, and it will be recorded. And please reach out to us if there were any questions that we did not get to. We thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of this conference. Thanks.